savings, what to do for retirement, things like that. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to execute this, but I'm going to have it where the stuff you do in lab, like say at the end there's a worksheet you fill out. Everything we've done in labs leads up to this one thing where I think I need to save this percent of my total income and invest it like this. That will be done before, say, finals week, and that'll count towards your final grades for your final exam, such that when you come in and actually do the final exam, maybe, I don't know, 10, 15, 20% of it is already done from the lab stuff, and if you come to labs and get, you should be able to get a high grade for that. Another thing you may have seen, I'm giving more homeworks than I had in the past, so instead of only dropping 2 homeworks, you can now drop 4. No homework stuff yet, but there'll be a rather short homework up this. What we're going to do today is we're going to continue on this discussion of how do we act like those fire ants who work so well together as one cohesive unit as a society. We're talking about how you identify places where we need to act together, whether it be through social groups, church, government, how to identify those situations and how do we go about doing it. We're going to first start off by taking some notes, and I'm going to use the numbering I use for the notes is going to correspond to the numbering in the article from what we're discussing. For instance, the first part of the notes we're going to be doing, I'm going to label B.1. That's because when you go to the article that we're talking about, that section number is B.1. And the notes, I'm not going to write anything that isn't in the article. So if you don't want to write along with this, you don't have to. It's in the article. But I'm doing it this. Sometimes it's just easier to remember things and understand it if you write it down yourself. We're going to start off by taking some notes, get to this thing called public goods, and in discussing about the whole debate about farm animal welfare, how we treat that. The first thing we're going to look at, from the article, is we're starting to take goods and talk about what kind of goods they are. And we're trying to, in the end, we're going to classify all goods according to 4 different categories. And by doing that, we first have to decide whether a good is a rival good or a non-rival good. So I'm going to put rival, the definition of a rival good, and then we'll talk about two examples. A rival good is where only one person, could be a small group, but I'm only writing one person, can consume a single unit, at one time. Most of the goods you have are rival goods, meaning if you have the good and you're consuming it, other people can also consume that exact same thing you consume. Meaning if you eat a hamburger, someone can't eat that same hamburger. It's gone. If you have an iPad and are using an iPad right now, no one else can really use that iPad. Yes, you can share a little, you can both use the same screen, but it's not like both of you having an iPad. It's not like you can buy an iPad and that's the same thing as 10 people having an iPad. You'll see the distinction in there. Most of the goods we have are rival goods, meaning if it's yours, you consume it. The only way someone else can consume it is if you give it to that other person before going to do something yourself. So we're talking about things like burgers, iPads, and you'll see exactly what this distinction is when we start talking about its opposite, the non-rival goods. In a non-rival good, many people can share. Many people can consume a single unit. Examples are TV shows. While I was eating my lunch today, I was watching one of the episodes from Happy Endings, one of my favorite ABC sitcoms. Raise your hand if you've also watched those episodes. A few people. It could be everybody. Everybody in the United States could watch the same episode very easily. It's something that can be shared with multiple people. That's what a non-rival goods. We could all consume any one single unit. Also, knowledge. If you use the Heimlich maneuver, that knowledge of how to use it, everybody can consume that knowledge. Everybody can use it. Just because one person's doing the Heimlich maneuver doesn't mean you have to stop and wait till the end before you can do it. All right, knowledge. National defense, or protection from Canadian aggression. When the Canadians invade, and they will, and the government ceases to wipe them off the earth, we will all take enjoyment. We can all consume knowing that we are free of Canadian tyranny. Everybody. If Muscle Man is free of Canadian aggression, I am too. We can all share that. I want to go and I want to add another thing to our rival goods. Fish is a rival good. Oil is a rival good. If you're burning oil, I can't go take that same barrel of oil and burn it myself. We have rival, non-rival. Now we're going to do excludable and non-excludable. Excludable. Have owner of a good can exclude other people from consuming it. That kind of sounds like it's inconsistent. Like if you own something, you should be able to exclude other people from consuming it, and that is the point that we're going to see in a minute. It doesn't have to be your owner. As far as excludable goods, burgers, iPad. If you own a burger, you can exclude other people from consuming it. It's yours. If you own an iPad, you can exclude other people from consuming it. It's yours. I'm going to repeat those over here. But you're going to see I'm not going to write fish and burger. And non-excludable people cannot be excluded from consuming. It's true that if you have a fish in your hand and you boil it, then you can't exclude other people from consuming it. It's yours. So fish in your hand that you bought in the market, that would be an excludable good. But fish in the sea, in the water, if you bought a boat and you're going out there to catch fish, then if you get a fish, then yeah, it's yours. But anyone else can also bring a boat out to international waters and get that fish. And oil. You may have land and you can drill down to get the oil, but that deposit where that oil came from probably goes way beyond your borders. and someone 20 miles down may be sucking from the same deposit of oil that you are, and you can't really do anything about it. You can't say what's under my land, only I can do it because it's under other people's land as well. Remember the aquifer in western Oklahoma? If you drill down to the Ogallala Aquifer and you start sucking water, other people can suck from that same water, and you can't stop it. There's nothing you can do about it. That makes it non-excludable. So I'm going to write fish at sea. Before they are caught, at least. All before it's extracted. At least. What we're going to do is we're going to use these 4 definitions and use them to group every single good that exists into one of 4 categories. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make just a little bit large of a table, but I'm going to show you the dimensions of the table, number of columns, number of rows, and then that'll give you an idea of how much room you use in your notes for. We're basically just going to have, it's going to be a big table, space at least. It's going to be 2 columns and just 2 rows. And in each block, you're going to write the name of one type of good and just a few examples. First row is going to be for arrival good. Second row for non-arrival. First column is going to be for excludable goods. Second column for non-excludable. Just in advance, second row, first column, there is a type of good here that we're going to ignore in this class. So some come plug goods like going to football games, utilities like telephone wires, but we're going to ignore because we want to concentrate on the most. When I ask you things you consume, most of those things are both excludable and liable. Almost everything you have, your computers, your clothes, your phones, those are liable, meaning when you consume it, only you can be consuming it. And they're excludable, meaning other people can't just come and take it from you. So most of these goods are going to be liable and excludable. Those are called private goods. And our examples there were a burger and an iPad. Whenever a good is private, economists usually don't worry about it very much because usually the markets work very well when they are private goods. It's these other 2 categories when we say, well, maybe there's a way for society to come together through government, some sort of collective actions, and improve upon markets. And that's what we're going to be focusing on. When you have a good that is both liable and non-excludable, we have a common resource. Common resource. Now we've already seen 2 of these. We know a fish at sea and all, we know they're liable. Before they're taken, at least, they're non-excludable. So on the common resource, I'm going to put fish at sea. I'm going to put oil. In cases of common resources, sometimes, unless we act together, we use too much of them. Something happens called the tragedy of the commons, but that's the next lecture. We're going to focus on this last category. Non-rival, non-excludable, that's what we call public goods. As the name insists, it's something that kind of belongs to the public, which is kind of like saying no one can really own it and no one can be stopped from using it. When I asked you why a corporation doesn't do research into things like coming up with a Heimlich maneuver, people said, well, they couldn't make money from doing it, and the reason is they couldn't go out and charge people every time they do the Heimlich maneuver. It's non-excludable. You can't go out and say, hey, we came up with this, nobody do the Heimlich maneuver unless you send us money. You just can't do it. And we also talked about how knowledge is non-rival. If you know how to do the Heimlich maneuver, everybody else can have that knowledge at the same time. So on the public goods, we're going to have knowledge, national defense. Going to be another example. There's a reason no one's calling for the to privatize the army. They're saying, why don't we let the market provide national defense? It's unthinkable. It's ridiculous because for these reasons.
Couldn't afford it.
You know, it used to be you could hire mercenaries, but there was a king who hired mercenaries, not people. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You can do that a lot. But it's paid for by the government. Just the government's not held accountable for whatever happens, right? No government. I'm going to concentrate on these public goods. We're going to look at two examples. One is protecting the ozone layer. The other one is farm animal welfare of sows. Let me warn you, when we get to sow, I research farm animal welfare. I don't want you to think I'm coming here like an animal rights activist saying what farmers do is cruel or anything. I'm just showing you the economics of an issue. I want you to be open-minded that when we talk about animal welfare, different people have different beliefs. And as an economist, I can't come out and say, well, I think only the ag people's belief matters. I have to think about everybody in the world. I don't know how well y'all remember the whole ozone scare thing. It was in the 80s. Y'all were in Vipers and I was rocking out to Duran Duran. So you probably know what it is. You probably talked about it in school. You have the atmosphere protects you with stuff. You gotta remember the 80s, hair was crazy. People put hairspray, there was more actual spray in people's hair than actual hair. It had to be really, really stiff. And so we were using lots of hairspray. It had these aerosols. And it turned out that the stuff came out, those hairspray cans would go up in the air, and it would deplete some of the ozone, and it turned out the ozone protected us from certain things from the sun that would give us cancer. And so all of a sudden we had this good that didn't exist before. The restoration of the ozone layer. Now this is a public good, and when I'm talking about public, I mean the whole world. First, it's non-rival. If the U.S. government goes up and does a lot of action to restore the ozone layer, everybody in the world partakes in that good. Everybody in the whole world gets to consume that same unit. Whatever the activities that went into restoring the ozone layer, everybody consumes it simultaneously. We can all share it. So it's non-rival. and it's non-excludable. What happened was the U.S. government led an effort, and it ended up resulting in this thing, I think it was called the Montreal Treaty or Montreal Agreement. And basically we just banned a lot of this harmful stuff. Hairsprays, you didn't see as much for a while, then they learned how to make hairsprays that didn't destroy the ozone layer. 80s hairstyles didn't come back, but if we ever, well, we're prepared for it. If it happens, right there. And so a lot of people like teenagers in the 80s, we could, maybe it cost more to do our hair, crazy. And, well, we couldn't just go out. There were a lot of other people who didn't pay for it. People in Papua New Guinea, they didn't even know what we were doing probably. We couldn't exclude them and say, no, if you didn't help pay for this, you cannot enjoy protection of the ozone layer. How would you even go about doing it? You couldn't. So it's non-excludable as well. So this makes this a very public good. It would be very hard for the private sector to come out and provide this service for us. And as a result, even, the Reagan administration is known for being anti-regulation. They led a great privatization movement. That's where airlines got privatized, things like that. He's the one who said government is not the solution, government is the problem. But when it came to the ozone layer, he was an environmentalist. And what happened, when we are trying to figure out whether the government should provide a public good, we try to do something called a benefit cost analysis, which is exactly what it sounds. We try to measure the cost, how much more money we have to pay to get rid of those harmful aerosols, and we measure the benefits. And economists actually went out and did this. They said, okay, if we don't do anything about the ozone, it's going to get worse. This many people are now going to get skin cancer. This many people are going to die. Remember, the value of a statistical life is between 4 and 8 million. So you can calculate the benefits of protecting the ozone layer. You can calculate the cost. And Reagan saw that the benefits were just enormous relative to the cost. The costs were tiny, and the benefits were enormous. And Reagan did not even hesitate. He led the movement to get rid of it. He led a great big government movement to ban these harmful things, and he got other countries involved, and it worked great. This is from the 1950s and above, the amount of harmful substances that were in the air, and after this movement, it declined. And so when it comes to public goods, if you can demonstrate through cost-benefit analysis that it really does benefit the public, you find that you can really get many politicians involved, not just the politicians who love everything government, even the politicians who are railing against government all the time. So that's one example, one that actually happened, one that was very successful, that everybody is, you don't hear anybody complaining about this. But now I want to take us to a different public good that's going to be more controversial. I want to introduce it with this video. Come on, browser. Here, you're fired.
I'm Juliana McCannis, sitting in for Clifford Baines, who was hunting down the scumbag who killed his father. PETA has been fighting for animal rights for decades with little success. Shouldn't animals be helping more win the fight for their rights?
Well, I'll tell you, right now, it's a very every animal for itself attitude out there. They need to organize.
Yes, I think animals need to take control of their own future, and I've been telling that to my dog for years.
Oh.
But if they ever want to vote, they had better start learning how to march.
They have tried, and they have failed miserably. Do we remember when PETA tried to organize that million-dog march down in Washington? It was a mess, I mean, not only did they not build in the infrastructure for cleaning up after themselves, but it just was not organized. It was a disaster. We all agree. I think they have to stop eating each other and really kind of come to the table and say, all right, we're all on the same page here.
And that's what PETA doesn't understand.
Animals have traditionally been politically apathetic.
Well, animals need to demand their rights to fair animal trials. Then they can wear little robes, dress up like lawyers, and kind of have a jury.
Don't forget the little hats.
I agree, but which of them deserves
the
Well,
rights.
I know one that doesn't deserve the rights, and that's the water buffalo. The water buffalo, and I will be dead and in the ground, eaten by maggots before I see a water buffalo with the same rights as
If
I.
PETA dropped the so-called problem animals, would they have more success?
If anything, the great white sharks, the anacondas, and the,
I don't like those hermit crabs.
For me, a member of PETA is their persistent support of the water buffaloes. I mean,
Nobody is going to argue with that point.
thank you.
Well, I mean,
But
some people do argue.
What should they do to get these rights for animals?
Just keep throwing paint on people.
Because people love having paint thrown on them.
Yes, it's lovely.
This issue is an issue I've done a lot with, and what we're talking about, is it okay to leave this other one down? So you have sows. Sows are mommy. I almost said cows, because it rhymes with sows, it just comes with that. Sows are mommy pigs. And most of the time, we raise sows like this, at least when they're in the gestation stage, in gestation stalls. You can see that it's on a concrete pad, it's really tight, they can't turn around. Most Americans really, really do not like this at all. And the sow's going to spend 2/3 of our life there. And so there's been a lot of calls to ban these gestation crates, and I want to say 4, 5, 6 states, they have actually done that. None of the major pig states. But some states have banned these things. Some people say we should ban all of them in the U.S. And what would happen is if we ban the gestation stalls, it's not going to be a case where farmers just convert to your kind of ideal pasture shelter system. What they're going to do is they're going to put the sows in pens, 3 to 5 together. They're going to give the sows more space, but they're still going to be on a concrete pad. And well, the problem now they can just, sows are mean. They want to feed each other to death in there. So a lot of people, when they look at these two systems, they say, well, they both have trade-offs. This is cruel in that it inhibits movement, but it protects the sows. This system over here lets the sows move around, but it doesn't protect sows from other aggressive sows. Now, let's just leave the debate about whether the group pens is actually better than gestation stalls. Let's just assume it is. That's what, in my research, most animal scientists say the group pen is definitely a lot better than the gestation traits. But in animal science departments at land-grant universities, you don't have that agreement. All the Europeans say. Let's just say that the general American public and Europeans and animal rights people are right, that putting sows in group pens is much more humane than raising sows in gestation crates. This is a public issue. And now we have this good that was private, pork being rival. If I consume a pork chop, you cannot. You can exclude people from coming to your house and opening your fridge and eating your pork. So it's a private good. But this thing called animal welfare, it's got some, this animal welfare component of pork, it's got some public good attributes. Think about it like this. Suppose that I consume only pork that comes from crate-free systems raised in the group pen. I'm spending more money to promote this alternative system. Because of me, let's say, 4 sows now get to live a happier life here, as opposed to a more miserable life here. So my actions made sows happy. Now, I may not get much support here. If I made 5 sows happier, raise your hand if that makes you happier as well. Don't be bashful.
Do they taste better?
May or may not. I don't know.
Are you on the waiting list to get them?
There's actually no such thing as just crate-free pork that I've been able to find. If you went to any other, most other classes at college, most people would have raised their hands. They'll actually do this, I understand. The point is that I did something that made sows happier, Sal's being happier made me happier. That's why I paid for it. But other people got happier from that too. They're free riders. I was the good person who bought crate-free pork, and these other people, knowing that happened, became happier. So that animal welfare portion that's making sales happier, it's non-rival, and it's also non-excludable. If I spend money to make sales happier, and that makes you happier, I can't go to you and say, no, you can't be happy because of that because you didn't pay for it. I can't do that. I mean, think about vegans. They would love for sales to be happier, but they're not going to go out and buy crate-free pork. But my actions benefited them. And if you're thinking about public policy for all Americans, you would think you'd want to include the vegans. So we have this good that was private and now has some public good attributes to it. And now we have this question, how do we make this decision? Now, of course, there are a lot of ways of determining, and the question is, do we ban gestation stalls? Meaning, do we act the law that says nobody in the U.S. can raise sows in gestation stalls, under the presumption that if that happened, everybody would convert to new pens. There's a lot of different, in reality, that policy is going to be determined through politics. And from what I've read in y'all's paper, y'all seem to understand exactly how politics works. But when people want an economic analysis, economists tend to do something different. And I'm going to show you some of the research I did on this issue. I'm going to show you how we go about doing this. And I'll repeat this at the end, but let me warn you ahead of time, I don't necessarily think this is a good way of doing it. I think it has a lot of problems, but it's the general economic fact. Rush, so I got to teach it to you. These pictures are in the article that's pertaining to the last 2 or 3 lectures, and this is section E.2. What I'm doing is I'm not writing down the parts how we decided that some portion of banning gestation crates or the policy itself of banning gestation crates is a public good. And let's just say we all understand, we've read the article, you've heard me and understand me. Making sales happier by spending money on something is a public good. But how do we know whether those benefits that people get outweigh the costs? That Onion episode made it seem like animals should stand up for themselves. If something's going to benefit for the animals, then they should be representing themselves. And of course, that's a farce. In reality, animals can't represent themselves, so we have to be empathetic and stand in forward, and it's like representing them. And if you're asked to do this as an economist, regardless of whether your personal feelings about animal rights, you may think animal rights and PETA is ridiculous. You may support more moderate groups like Humane Society. Regardless, you tend to do it the same way. I'm looking at the benefits and costs of banning gestation crates. Which we said is a public good. I'm going to go in a lot of detail to this, but I want you to make you aware of just how important benefit cost analysis is in public issues. There's a law that says if legislatures enact some kind of regulation that's going to cause this much cost to someone, there's some way of measuring it. It says you have to do a benefit cost analysis. So if you're trying to act a really big government program, the law says you have to do a benefit cost analysis of it first. These things are really in demand. We've got some good classes on exactly how to do this. I'm going to kind of give you the bottom line of what we found. We found that the pork production costs rise by production costs increased by about 7 cents per retail pound of pork. Doesn't mean grocery store prices would go up by that much. That means how much more both the consumer and farmer spend together producing pork after this change. You can imagine how you estimate the cost. You look at the cost of converting the farms, the extra cost of feed, the greater sow mortality because they're beating the hell out of each other, that kind of thing. You know, if you really thought you could imagine how you do the cost, but the benefits are a little bit different. When you're measuring the benefits of this ban to America, what you're trying to say, benefits, we want it in dollar values to compare with cost. What is the max amount of money that all American citizens, if they all threw the max amount of money together in a pot, what's the max amount of money that they would pay for this ban? Including vegans who would never eat pork that says, I'll lay down $10 if this ban passes. Everybody. Doing it as a group, not as individually, as a group. That's how you want to measure benefits, but as you can imagine, you can't really estimate that unless you actually ask people to do it. You can't go around where all Americans together at one place and say, throw your money in a pot. It can't happen. So you have to estimate it. I'm going to give you the answer, but then I'm going to tell you how I got it. I found the benefits, meaning you look at the total amount of money that people are willing to pay, and you put it on a per pound basis, the benefits of banning gestation crates is a little over 8 cents per retail pork. It's higher than the cost, but I'm going to qualify that in a second. Because you may find this interesting, let me give you an idea of how I measure that. I went to Dallas, Wilmington, North Carolina, Chicago, Illinois. I paid a firm to recruit people, paid them like $50, $75 to spend an hour with me. They came to a room, I gave them a short presentation and tried to be objective as I can about how sows are raised, what's animal welfare is like here, what's like there. And then we said, okay, we're now going to auction off some pork chops. Here is some regular pork chops from a gestation stall barn. Here is some pork chops from a group pen barn without the gestation stalls. Then we had them bid on the 2 pork chops. And we kind of held a weird scientific bid. And in the end, what we got were numbers from people, and they were willing to bid more on the group pen than the gestation crates. So I found that in the experiment, people were willing to give more to buy the crate-free pork chop. I also did this. This gets more to that public thing. I said, okay, we're going to enter an auction. You enter your bid. And whoever wins gets to choose where a certain number of sows live. And it was like 1,000 sows. So we have and it was a real auction where people are actually given money to choose to have sows raised here rather than there. The important thing was none of the pork from those hogs they would consume. We meant that it went to another place in a different part of the country. So we were asking people how much money you'd pay to make sows happier when you're not going to consume any of the pork in that sow. Those two together give us some kind of idea of what these benefits are. We found the benefits were about 8.5 cents per pound. The costs were only 6.5 cents. If I was someone who was actively promoting the banning of gestation crates and I let my personal feelings influence my research, I would use this to say, we should ban gestation stalls. I'm an associate professor at OSU. I did scientific research with a grant from the federal government. And I concluded that the benefits are greater than the costs. measured benefits are greater than the cost. And then I would say, thus, Americans want to ban gestational costs. I know, I studied the issue. There's no doubt about it. I've got the benefits and costs right there. If, on the other hand, I was someone who didn't like animal rights activists, and I didn't like these results, and I wanted to say, yeah, well, you can't really pay too much attention to this, I would say it's false. And let me also say, what we're doing now, I've kind of shown you a little bit of how you do a benefit-cost analysis, lots of different ways. If you're someone interested in studying consumer marketing, consumer demand, people's preferences for public policy, economics has a big field just waiting for you. You can do some really interesting research, surveying and experimenting with people. But in the end, I give those results, but I'm a little cautious about them because I know this. People in, I'm going to write this down in a minute, people in an experiment behave very, very different than people not in an experiment. When you're brought in to a research with Bailey Norwood, Bailey's already paid you $75 to be there. Then I'm asking you what you think about farm animal welfare. Two things going on. One, they're going to want to please me. It's the natural way it is. I've given them money. And they think that because I'm doing research, I must want animal welfare to improve. They're also going to say, well, if this wasn't a problem, why would Oklahoma State be doing research on this? So the mere act of doing research on animal welfare sends a signal to people that there is an animal welfare problem. And also when people know their behavior is being watched, they are completely different people. Absolutely different. And when they, even if on a survey, telephone survey, they act different because you want to portray yourself as a better person than you really are, even if it's just anonymous. Let me give an example. I did a big telephone survey of Americans, and I said, what's more important, having low meat prices or animals being happy? No.
No, that's what I was thinking.
Well, you're a jerk, so.
I don't dispute that.
Or you're honest. I'm going to get there. Most people said happy animals. I didn't phrase it just like that, but I'm trying to make it short for you. Because that makes you sound like a good person. I don't just care about myself. I want animals to be happy. But then when we said to another group, a similar group, do you think the average American cares more about low meat prices or happy animals? Now, every 75% of people said low meat prices. Because I'm a good person. Everybody else is an asshole. That's kind of like what it is. But in reality, I've done some other research where I found that if you want to predict how people actually behave in a grocery store, don't ask them what they think. Ask them what they think the average American thinks. So the measured benefits are greater than the cost, but benefits are overestimated. There's a lot of psychology there. If you're interested in the interface of psychology and what you think of as regular economics, and there's a lot in economics for it. Clickers. Remember channel 46. You've got supply for wheat. If the price of wheat falls, how does the supply curve change? Yeah. All right, good job. You can go home now. That's the end.